And they didn't do much either. They badly needed a starting pitcher, and what they did was acquire injured guys.
Here we go. We are back with FT Senior Insider Ken Rosenthal. It is the day after the madness. So, Ken, good to see you. Great job, as always, of course, covering the deadline as good as anyone. And I wanted to get your take on the aftermath, too, because that's a big deal in terms of what you cover. You put out a story about Jack Flaherty and his medicals scaring away a team like the Yankees. Can you elaborate for us on what happened there?
Yes, what I reported was that the Yankees had an agreement in place for Jack Flaherty and backed off because of medical concerns. And it was the back, which of course Jack Flaherty had an issue with in early July. If you remember, it was out there that he missed the start. He received 2 injections in 3 weeks and since then came back really strong. He had 3 great starts. But as I wrote in the article, and I encourage people to read every sentence, teams can have different assessments of players' values based on their medical. They can look at medicals differently. It's a subjective process. And the other thing is they can change their assessment of a player's value based on what they see in the medical and maybe even attempt to make lower offers. Now, Brian Cashman, the Yankees GM, just met with reporters on Zoom in New York, and he said that they were in it right until the end. I assume that means that they were making lower offers. And he did not deny our story. He just said it wasn't medicals. We just had a different opinion of value. Well, the difference of opinion on value was because of what they perceived in the medical. The Dodgers clearly went forward with this. It's a 2-month rental. Jack Flaherty looks healthy. He's asymptomatic. There's, on the surface, nothing to be concerned about. But again, I will stress this. Teams can have different views of a player's condition, just like we go for second opinions to see what a doctor might say about our conditions. And that is what happened here.
Ken, are they the only team that backed off because of this? And then how often does this happen? Because we don't hear about this happening a lot. You hear about it every once in a while, like maybe we saw with Correa a couple off seasons ago with his foot, right? Where the Giants and I forgot the other team now who backed off of them. The Mets, right? Mm-hmm. Right, backed off of them. So how often do we see this happen? And were there other teams that got scared away because of this?
Not to my understanding, AJ. My understanding is that the Yankees were the only ones, and then it got around the industry that this was going on, and other teams might have backed off at that point. The package that the Tigers received, in the estimation of people who are analyzing this, was perhaps not as good as they could have gotten, and maybe this was part of the reason because of the medical concern. It's hard to say. It's hard to know that, but at the same time, we'll see what happens here. And even with Carlos Correa, we'll see what happens. Yes, 2 teams backed out because of him, but so far so good. He's had some foot issues, but not really related, it seems, to the problem that was diagnosed at the time. So again, people can have different views of a medical, and really what matters is how the player is performing and how he is going forward. And Jack Flaherty right now looks pretty good.
How much of we look at all the moves today and yesterday that were made, how many moves that weren't made would surprise fans? Or is it really like everything that's reported and, it's just kind of out there? Because you're just fielding thousands of texts and calls yesterday.
Right. It's not out there, all that might have happened. And it's interesting you asked that, Eric, because yes, yesterday I think there were 32 trades. So we're not capable. No one is capable of knowing everything that's going on anyway. But in that kind of flurry, there's no way you're kind of hearing all this other stuff. Now, I had heard the stuff on Flaherty for a couple of days. So that's why I was on to it. But I recall 2 stories that I've done in recent years that did not pop up until much later. One was on Bryce Harper getting traded to the Astros at the deadline. That was when he was his last year before becoming a free agent. That didn't happen, but I didn't find out about it, I think, until February. And then just a couple of weeks ago, might have even been last week, I wrote a story about how the Rangers had interest in Sal Perez, not Martin Perez. He was traded yesterday. In Sal Perez last year at the deadline. I didn't hear about that until a year later. So things will pop up from time to time, and we'll hear different things and report them if we think they're worthy. But of all that goes on, I don't know that we get even 5% of the conversations. There is just so much that happens, so much that is discussed. It would probably blow our minds if we knew exactly what was going on because of the breadth of the discussions. But at the same time, ultimately what matters is what happened, and that's what everyone was focused on yesterday.
On things that happened yesterday, did the Astros just give up so much for Kikuchi for a rental player? I mean, they gave up 4 players, and also did the Padres give up too much for Tanner Scott?
Two interesting questions to come out of this. And the Astros are taking heat for this within the industry. People do think for a rental with a 4.75 ERA, that was too steep a package. But it's interesting. A GM made this point to me last night. The Dodgers farm system is much stronger than the Astros farm system. So if you get 3 of the better prospects from the Astros system versus 2 from the Dodgers, for example, the Dodgers 2 might be better than the Astros 3, even if they're not ranked as highly within their system. So that's something to keep in mind, but certainly the Astros paid a steep price and, in the perception of many, overpaid for what you said, AJ, a rental with an ERA of 4.75. The Padres did what the Padres do, and AJ Preller is a master at acquiring star talent. He is also a master of replenishing the prospects that he trades, because I don't know how many times I've written in recent years, oh man, they're empty in the farm system, and yet they always seem to come up with more. And you can justify it from the Padres' perspective simply because their window is not all that long, in my opinion. Manny Machado is going to be really a great player for only a few more years, right? Bogart's the same. So you've kind of got to win. And you've got 1 year of Dylan Cease here. He's a free agent. Oh, I'm sorry, you've got 1 more year of him. This is a smaller window. And they're trying to max out and win now. I get it. Now, where it leads down the line, I don't know. But again, he does seem to keep replenishing his system, in part, well, mainly because he's such a great evaluator. So I don't always love what AJ Preller does. Sometimes I think it's extreme, and yesterday was extreme. The 2 trades, well, actually over a couple of days, for Adam and Scott and Honig. But at the same time, man, they've got a heck of a team. A little thin in the rotation still, but that bullpen is a powerhouse.
When you're getting all these flurries of calls and texts, are you sitting there going, whoa, once the Tanner Scott thing drops, maybe I'm going to hear something, more from the Dodgers? Do teams react to what other teams do in trades? Or is it just, hey, this is our plan no matter what? Because as the Padres kept moving, you're like, Dodgers have kind of done some stuff. Maybe this could be a bigger move from them. Or is that it's not necessitated, and you had heard about the Flaherty stuff for days leading up to it?
I think at the deadline, Eric, teams can't react like that. They don't have time to react like that. The Dodgers are doing what the Dodgers are doing. They were determined to come away with a starting pitcher. And they were in on Crochet. They were in on Flaherty. They ended up with Flaherty. The Padres were doing what they were doing. They were trying to get bullpen help, and they were really focused on that. They also wanted a starter, did not come away with one, but they were operating in somewhat of a vacuum with regard to each other. And even during the offseason, when there is more time, there's not this pressure that, of course, the deadline brings. It seems to me teams do what they do, and they're not necessarily reacting to another team. Even the way the Dodgers loaded up in the offseason, right? Did the Diamondbacks and Padres and Giants just decide, now we have no chance? No. They continued adding, trying to make their teams as good as possible. So while it's human nature to react, and I'm sure there's some level of reaction in there, I don't know that it's the driving force.
Ken, with no more waiver deadline August 31st, how much more pressure are on these teams? Some teams that obviously aren't going to make the playoffs give up a bunch of players, and they're like, oh man, we just gave up 3 of our best prospects to get a reliever for a rental. Like, is there a way? I don't know. Again, I like one trade deadline as a player, but as a fan looking at it, you're like, okay, well, maybe we could still do the trade waiver deadline thing where everyone clears waivers. I know it's confusing for fans, but it just seems like we're done now. Like, now we go 2 months and there's nothing. I mean, I know there was a little bit with Giolito and Lopez and what the Angels did last year. Most teams aren't. No other team, I don't think. I mean, yeah, some other team is going to try that, but for me, it seems like there's got to be something else we can do to keep, some people engaged and say, oh, wait, we've fallen out of it. Maybe we can get something for XYZ.
Well, we might see those kinds of waiver moves that the Angels made last year. We might see that continue. Those aren't really trades, and usually it's dumping salary. It's not the same as what we're talking about with trades, obviously. So I actually like this system, and there are some people who believe that the trade deadline should be pushed back to mid-August, especially now. That way we can separate the sellers from the buyers a little bit more. I don't care for that. I think the prospects returns would not be as sexy in that environment. I don't know that the players traded would have the same kind of impact in 6 weeks that they do in 8. I kind of like the system the way it is. And yes, AJ, you're right. There is pressure on teams to get it done by July 30th or 31st, whatever the date might be in a particular year. There's a lot of pressure. Now, the one thing we should mention here, guys, and we really haven't talked about, is the reason this deadline was a little bit different is because not only were there fewer sellers, and that's going to be something that's probably common in this age of expanded playoffs, there were not that many great players available. Skubal didn't move, Snell didn't move, Crochet didn't move, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. didn't move, Luis Robert Jr. didn't move. All of these really good players that were discussed did not get traded. So to me, that part is cyclical, and it's just part of what this deadline was. But that is why, and I'm going to write this later today, there are going to be fans disappointed with what their teams did and looking at their GMs and saying, hey, why isn't there more? There wasn't more to be had. That's the reason.
Okay, so I have 2 follow-ups here. Let me do the first one on the teams that we're selling. Is there some frustration that you even have for certain teams that especially keep rentals? Like, obviously, I don't think anyone's surprised. We called out the Rockies for certain free agents that are there. It's like, get something for them. You're not in the playoffs this year. We've blasted the Angels pretty good for guys like Rengifo and Tyler Anderson. I don't know if you want to go on any of those or any others that stood out.
Well, Rengifo and Tyler Anderson and Taylor Ward, they're not free agents. They're guys under control for next year, and I presume the Angels listened on them, but they determined that, you know what, we're not getting enough to sacrifice having them next year too. That is a decision they made. We've talked about how they should have made trades in the past. Ohtani, we've discussed that maybe they should trade Trout. They operate, as a number of teams do, including the Rockies, in their own little insular world, and you tell me if it's working. It's not working. The White Sox had been another team. The Pirates were like that for years. They did a little bit yesterday, but some of these teams operate as if there's nothing else going on around them, and they just do their thing. To me, the Rockies certainly should have traded some of those starting pitchers that they had who were on expiring contracts. And the Angels, I think they should have done more too. Yeah, they have an interesting group of young position players in particular and some young pitchers. Well, why not trade Rengifo into someone that could join that group? Taylor Ward the same, maybe even Tyler Anderson. To me, that was the way to go. I know they want to build a competitive team for next year, but you keep spinning your wheels and you keep trying to win every year. Well, in a situation like they're in, they don't win any year.
Hey, Ken, it's going to be, I tell you what, you mentioned all the names that weren't traded, and we just talked about even more. It's going to be a fascinating winter because does Crochet get moved? Does the Skubal get moved? All the names, Tyler Anderson, some of these other Angel guys, it's going to make for a fascinating winter, not only with the free agents that are possibly out there, but then with some of these other teams that miss out on certain guys, they're going to say, well, we can go get a Garrett Crochet. We can go get a Tarek Skubal maybe, and it opens it up. So I think on some of these guys, it wasn't like, hey, we're not moving them now. It's like, we're going to move them, just not now to when we can open it up to all 30 teams.
That's a really good point, AJ, and I'll come back to the Angels on that. They know that this winter they will have the opportunity to trade Rengifo in particular. Let's use him as an example. There aren't many great infielders available this winter. Vuori Ad is a shortstop. He's out there. I don't know who's available at second base as free agents. It's not great. So yes, once the free agent prices start rolling in, and they're usually pretty high, a guy like Rengifo, who is arbitration eligible, will be that much more attractive. That's part of the team's calculus too when they figure out these things. Crochet is a separate category because of what was out there about what he wanted to do and not pitch in the playoffs unless he got an extension. He still will have great value in the offseason because he's under control for 2 more years, and he's starting at a salary of $800,000 with those 2 years of arbitration remaining. So I can see him getting moved for sure, and I can see some of these other players getting traded as well.
Trade deadline is talked about with teams that are on the fringe. Oh, no sell, yes, no. I want to talk about the World Series teams, and one of them is the Orioles. Did they do enough?
You probably would say no. You probably would say no, the Yankees didn't do enough. You might even say the Dodgers didn't do enough. My answer to all of this would be, well, there wasn't much more they could have done. Now, the Yankees had the Flaherty issue, of course. Okay, that's a different thing. But with the Orioles, they needed controllable starters. Skubal was not moving. He wasn't. We saw that now. He didn't move. Crochet was a complicated situation. He's controllable, but it didn't happen. They got two guys under control beyond this year. Zach Eflin is one. He's a really good pitcher. Trevor Rogers is a guy that is an average pitcher, I think you would say, and he's under control for two more. So they addressed their rotation. I don't know that their moves in the bullpen were or are going to work out the way they had hoped. These are guys that the Phillies didn't really want in their bullpen, Sir Anthony Dominguez and Gregory Soto, and then Eloy Jimenez as the bat that they're bringing in. Who knows? So in a sense, you would say, no, they didn't do enough. But when those other guys don't move to any team, I find it hard to be too down on really any of these clubs because, again, the quality of player available just was not that high.
I feel like I got to ask you about the Twins to finish this one off. I mean, this is back-to-back years of them essentially doing nothing in trade deadlines. Should they maybe be the most angry fan base because they did what everyone else did? They rebuilt for some time. They finally got to this point. They made some playoff money. And they not only refuse to make trades like this, they won't boost the payroll. And it sounded like that was part of the problem here, too. Oh, you want to add someone good? Well, we have to subtract. And how the heck are we going to do that? That sounds very complicated at a deadline.
That's the genesis of the problem. And if you're under payroll restrictions, things become more difficult. I look at Cleveland, too, okay? They were under payroll restrictions in the offseason. I imagine those have carried over. Not much has changed with their local TV situation. And they didn't do much either. They badly needed a starting pitcher, and what they did was acquire injured guys. Matthew Boyd, Alex Cobb. Now they're taking a chance on both. They're hoping they're going to be healthy. So definitely when you're under payroll restrictions, budgetary restrictions, limitations, that's going to influence things. Now, then it comes back to the question of what was available. Could they have overpaid for Kikuchi, for example? Would that have been smart for the Twins? I don't know. I don't know that would have been smart. And we'll see if it was smart for the Astros. We'll see how Loperfido develops in Toronto and whether Bloss becomes a real guy or not. Who knows? The one thing about these trades that we often kind of forget about as time goes on is we can look at them one way when they're made. As far as the prospect values, we know how they're rated publicly. Well, those ratings aren't always in the end accurate. And sometimes these trades turn out better than you think. Sometimes they turn out worse than you think. A guy like Ben Brown with the Cubs was traded by the Phillies for David Robertson, right? That trade a couple of years ago didn't make much noise. And Robertson certainly helped the Phillies get to the World Series. Ben Brown looks like he might be a pretty good starter for the Cubs going forward. So I always advise people to kind of look at it with a little bit of detachment and caution because it's something that we can evaluate in the short term as far as what the players contribute to your team, the ones that were bought per se. The ones that were sold, it takes a little bit more time.
Yeah, that's why we mostly focused on what teams got, right? The prospect returns, we do some with Baseball America, but even still, you're right. Like we look back at some of the trades over the past decade and the best returns are often like these mid-tier guys where you're like, oh, Josh Smith now is a really valuable player for the Rangers in the Joey Gallo deal, right? So yeah, I'm with you there. Everybody be patient on the 17-year-olds that are in A-ball or rookie ball and all that. Ken, awesome having you on. Thank you so much. Great job this week. Get some rest, and we'll see you on Fair Territory tomorrow.
Hey, FT fam, it's Alana Rizzo. I can't stop talking about Vuori. Vuori is perfect if you are sick and tired of traditional old workout gear. I wear Vuori in all settings, not just in the gym, because honestly, it's comfier than whatever you're currently wearing. No joke. I'm wearing Vuori daily leggings right now. They're high-waisted with the drawstring and cupped ankles. They look good, and they feel great. You're going to love them. Vuori is an investment investment in your happiness. For our listeners, they are offering 20% off your first purchase. Get yourself some of the most comfortable and versatile clothing on the planet at vuori.com/foul. That's VUORI.com/foul. Not only will you receive 20% off your first purchase, but enjoy free shipping on any U.S. orders over $75 and free returns. Go to vuori.com/foul and discover the versatility of Vuori clothing.
Hey, everybody. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.